Hello, my name is Chris. I'm an entrepreneurship attorney based in Boulder, Colorado, and also a contributor to Colorado AI News. If you are watching this video, you're probably watching it because you're also reading the corresponding article at coloradoai.news. In that article, I talk about how I use AI, both Spellbook, which is a program specifically for lawyers, and ChatGPT more generally, to make me a better lawyer. In the article, I talk about how using AI, it kind of makes me faster in some ways, but that's not really the main reason I use it. Rather, I use AI because it simply makes me a better lawyer. It helps me to catch errors. It helps me to communicate with people. It helps me to create better negotiating points for my clients and so on. And so I have here just the SaaS services order form. This is a pretty generic agreement. It's not real, of course. And I'm going to show you first how I use Spellbook, and later I'll jump into ChatGPT. So Spellbook, like I mentioned, is just for lawyers. It's a Microsoft Word plugin. And when you open it over here, you can do various things. You can just have a dialogue with it, with this chatbot. You can ask it to draft contract provisions for you. You can also have it review the contract in various different ways. And then you can use this new tool here. It's in beta, but it's a benchmark tool that tells you how full and how much coverage you have within the agreement. And in this case, it says it's 27%, which is probably true because this is only a few pages long. This doesn't have everything you would expect for it to have. So let me just show you a quick example. So if I scroll down here to the support exhibit that talks about how much support the service provider must provide to the customer, I could just come over here and ask Spellbook. Actually, no, let's use the review tab. Let's go to negotiate, and I'm going to say selected text. I don't want to review the full document because that can take some time. I choose who I represent. So in this case, it would be Acme Motors. I could add deal context if I wanted to, or I can just go ahead and start, right? And so what Spellbook is going to do is read through this highlighted text, propose changes that I might make to the text to make it better for my client, as well as provide context within comments that it will actually insert into the document if I like them. And this is one way to speed up my review, but also it's a way to, like I said earlier, just make me a better lawyer. So in this case, it thinks that I should extend the support hours. So instead of 9 to 5, it's saying 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Okay, so in this case, let's just apply that change, and you'll see what happens here. It does the redlining for me using track changes, and then inserts a comment here explaining why we made that change. Let's see, it talks about shortening the response time that the service provider has to get back to us on a support ticket. So in this case, instead of 1 business day, they're recommending we shrink it down to 6 hours, right? And again, it gives me a comment here. So that's all it's telling me for this one exhibit. And like I said, these comments here provide the context of why I'm making those changes. Pretty smooth, right? Let me look up here above. There's an indemnification in this agreement, which is a pretty typical indemnification provision. That's here. So actually, I'm going to delete some of this just to make this a little bit easier for this example here. So let's just delete some of that, just have an indemnification sentence. What I can do is I can ask Spellbook, I can have a dialogue with it about this provision. I could say, explain this provision to my client at a college level. And what it's doing here, again, it's focusing on the selected text instead of the whole agreement, and it's going to explain it, again, at a college level. Now, that's kind of a long explanation. Maybe I say, try again, but only provide 3 sentences. The more instruction you give it, the better the response usually is. So in this case, here's 3 sentences that explains the indemnification provision for my client. That's all correct. If a third party sues Infinite Software because of something Acme did, Acme must cover any related costs such as legal fees and settlements. I mean, that's right. And so this is something I could copy and paste. Now, granted, I've been doing this for 15 years. I could explain this to my client on my own. But you can imagine there's all kinds of scenarios where I might want to get a different context or just see if it might do it better than me. Or maybe it is truly a provision that I don't know or haven't come across and I want it to explain it. I can also ask it to explain it on both sides so that I could see, the contrasting opinions of the 2 different parties. Moving on, I can go further though and say, revise this this provision to make it more fair for my client and provide me with 3 sentences explaining the context of the change to the service provider. So I could do this here, and I could use the review and edit features like I had mentioned earlier, or I can just come in here and ask it to revise it right here. And so here is how it thinks I should revise the agreement. I can make the changes however I see fit. But this is what could be really useful, and I've used this in other deal contexts where I ask it to provide me this explanation here that I might use, or I might edit it further, that I can copy and paste and send it to the other lawyer to explain why we're making these changes. I mean, it's a really smooth process. I could apply it to the entire document or just sections, and it really, like I said earlier, it really makes me a better lawyer. Okay, so that's Spellbook, and that is unique to lawyers, and it's within Microsoft Word here. We don't have to worry quite as much about data that's being shared with the party because they have very strict data privacy rules. They can't see anything that I'm doing. They don't have access to any of the content in the documents. And because of their agreements with the various AI platforms, the AI platforms cannot train on this data or see it or use it in any capacity. And that's unlike ChatGPT. So when you're using the ChatGPT platform, there's no guarantees that your information there is confidential. So I recommend never inputting confidential information or any kind of client data into ChatGPT. So let's hop over there and we can take a look at how I use ChatGPT in my practice. All right, now we are in ChatGPT. I'm just in the web-based program here, not the Mac OS version. As you probably already know, you can use the different models over here. I've had a lot of success using the Canvas model so that I can edit the document within GPT down to the sentence level, which is wonderful. I've had an extremely great experience using the O1 model that has advanced reasoning, and that's just great. For this example here, I'm just going to stick with the 4O task. So, you can use this to draft documents and draft language. You can use it to give you summaries. For example, if you wanted to say, I need to draft an asset purchase agreement, please give me a section-by-section outline of what I should include. Now in this case, I don't want it to actually give me the language, I just want the section headers, right? So I'm going to literally tell it that, don't give me the provisions, just the headers. And it's great, it's wonderful. So what I use this for a lot is brainstorming, for exploring different things that I could be doing within an agreement and so on. I don't use it so much for drafting. I mean, I have a little bit, but for the most part, I'm using it for brainstorming and research purposes. So here is an outline of an asset purchase agreement. Now, I've done a lot of these. I have my own templates that I almost always work from, but you could see why if you don't do these normally, or if you're expanding into some new area, or if you're a new lawyer, this could be very helpful. So it talks about the recitals, it talks about the definitions that you might want to use, the purchase and sale of the assets, assumption of liabilities. So these are both assumed liabilities and excluded liabilities. That's really good. The purchase details, that's great, including any adjustments. How the closing will work, representations of each party, that's great. Conditions to closing, that's exactly what I would expect to see. Indemnifications of both sides and the scope of those. I mean, this thing just goes on and on and on and tells me everything that you would probably want to have in here. Schedule of the assets, schedule of the assumed liabilities, disclosures. I mean, this is just so useful to have, right? Let's do a new search. So this is actually a situation I mentioned in my article where I was working on an employment agreement for a Colorado-based client, but the employee was somewhere else, somewhere I've never worked before. So I'm going to make up scenarios here. I'm not going to use the real info, of course, but I have an employment agreement for Colorado, but the employee is in, let's just say Idaho. All right, actually, I don't know anything about Idaho law, so I'm going to see what it says here. What should I change in the agreement given that the employee is in Idaho and not Colorado? Tell me if there are any unique laws in Idaho I should consider, and provide me with links to learn more about those laws. All right, let's just see what this comes up with. Like I said, I don't know anything about Idaho law, so I don't know if this is right or not, but that's why I ask it for citations. I want to know where it learned this info so that I can click through it myself and see. They have this new source thing down here. I've actually never seen it presented in this way, but that's pretty cool. They literally list all the sources out here on the side. That's great. The way that I normally see it though is like you can click on the individual sources at the end of each paragraph. So it talks about at-will employment doctrines, a minimum wage and overtime law. Okay, that could be very relevant. So what I can do here is just click on that, and here we go, Guide to Idaho Labor Laws. Where'd this come from? Idaho.gov. I mean, this is probably legitimate and reliable, and the fact that it referenced it for me is really useful. So it summarizes it and tells me where to find it. It talks about meal breaks, payment of wages, non-compete. So like, can I have a non-compete in Idaho? I don't know. What is this? Statelawlibrary.com. I actually don't know what that is, but here is what looks like a summary of non-compete laws in the state of Idaho, and I can click back here and see what is state law library. Actually, I don't know what this is. I've never seen it, but I can do some digging maybe and look at some about pages or whatever to see who this is, right? It goes on to talk about drug testing, workers' comp, whether or not you need that. Sometimes you do and sometimes you don't, depending on how many employees you have and depending on the nature of the work that they are doing. So in this case, it looks like the Idaho Industrial Commission is in charge of workers' comp. And again, this is a real government website. And it talks about when you do or don't need it, which is perfect. And again, it summarizes it here. So my point is, I can come in here and in a matter of seconds get a gigantic list of all these different things, as well as all of these sources over here for things that I should consider changing in my employment agreement. Now, I could use Spellbook and do this exact same thing within Spellbook, and I've done that, and it works great. But I actually like to use both. GPT and Spellbook, because it's just another check to make sure I'm doing it right. But in either event, I always click through to the sources to make sure that Spellbook is giving me the right information, because as we all know, it can hallucinate, and that would be awful. So this is wonderful. This is how I use it in my practice. Like I had mentioned earlier, I don't recommend you put anything confidential or any client data, for that matter, into ChatGPT. Even though I have a paid account, I believe they still have the right to train on my data. I think I can adjust those settings within my account, but regardless, I don't recommend sharing anything confidential with GPT. It's just not worth the risk. With that said, it certainly makes me a better lawyer. It saves me time, for sure, but more importantly, it makes me a better lawyer. And I think that is what AI is going to do for most lawyers who use it intelligently. All right, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoyed the article. Hopefully in the near future, we'll make some more articles and videos like this for Colorado AI news. Thanks.